2 Samuel chapter 11. So the backdrop to it here is 2 Samuel chapter 8 and 9 and 10. He has some amazing victories. 10 in particular is pretty amazing. I mean, David pretty much becomes a superpower. Israel becomes a superpower because David conquers armies going all the way to sort of Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, that came to fight against him. Many of them, Assyrians, Babylonians, whatever, and he defeats them miraculously. He had no idea that he was going to fight them. He turns up for battle, thinking he's fighting a small tribe neighboring him, the Ammonites, and it turns out the Ammonites had formed a bit of an alliance, and they got a huge military whatever together, and David found himself surrounded, and it was like, okay, Lord, if you don't intervene, we're wiped out, pretty much. And David won. So, in that place of extreme victory, I'd like you to see what happened. Anybody familiar with this story? David and Bathsheba? No? Okay, we're going to read on. It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when the kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon, and they besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Big mistake. Really, he was supposed to have gone to battle with everybody. Notice it says the kings go out to battle, so David should have been there. That David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, virtually the whole army, and they went and destroyed the people of Ammon, and they besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about the woman. And someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliah, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Naughty, naughty, because she was somebody else's wife. For she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived. So she sent and told David, and said, "I am with child." Then David sent to Joab, saying, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah, the husband, had come to him, David asked how Joab was doing, the commander of the army, and how the people doing, and how the war has prospered. And David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah departed from the king's house, and a gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go in to his house. So when they told David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house," David said to Uriah, "Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live, and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." So Uriah was very loyal. Then David said to Uriah, "Wait there today also, and tomorrow I will let you depart." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now when David called him, he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening, he went out to lie on his own bed with the servants of his Lord. But he did not go down to his house. The intention was to make him drunk, so he goes home, so he sleeps with the wife, so that everybody thinks the child really was from the two of them. In the morning, it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter saying, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and then retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die." So it was, while Joab besieged the city, that he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew there were valiant men. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, "When you have finished telling the matters of the war to the king, if it happens that the king's wrath rises, and he says to you, 'Why did you approach so near to the city when you fought? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal? Was it not a woman who cast a piece of millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebes? Why did you go near the wall?' Then you shall say, 'Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.'" So the messenger said to David, "Surely the men prevailed against us and came out to us in the field. Then we drove them back as far as the entrance of the gate. The archers shot from the wall at your servants, and some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." Then David said to the messenger, "Thus you shall say to Joab, 'Do not let this thing displease you, for the sword devours one as well as the other. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it. So encourage him.'" And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. What is it that David had done that displeased God?
He's done two evil things, isn't he?
Quite a few things.
Yeah, took somebody else's wife and committed murder, basically.
Took somebody else's wife, yes.
Got pregnant as well.
Got her pregnant.
Yeah.
And then
Murder.
tried to conceal it by getting her drunk and sending her back home, saying, "Go and lie with your wife."
Lust. Yeah.
Lust,
And he
exactly.
didn't respect the man's honor, the
Yes.
man's loyalty.
The man was very loyal, and
He did recognise that. He
Yeah.
did appreciate it.
Wait, he got her drunk,
he got him
Him.
drunk.
got him drunk.
Yeah. And then sent him off with the idea that hopefully he'll go and sleep with the wife, and then he could then cover it up and say, well, the child really belongs to him. So he tried to cover up, didn't he?
Once that didn't work,
Yeah.
he then gets
But also he was married with
not
many
thinking.
women because he was polygamous, isn't it? And
Yeah.
he still like wanted somebody's wife,
He
and he only had one.
Yes. This poor man had just one wife, while David had lots of wives and concubines, and yet he was still not satisfied.
He was greedy.
He saw the woman and he said, "I have to have her." Well, Nathan, in chapter 12, we are told the Lord then sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and basically tells him off. and said to him, there were two men in one city, one rich and the other poor. And the rich man had exceedingly many flocks, going to what Lucy was saying, lots of wives, many flocks and herds. But the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and his children, and ate of his own food, and drank from his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and it was like the daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man, who refused to take from his own flock and from his own herd to prepare one for the wayfaring man who had come to him. But he went and took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. So David's anger was greatly roused against that man, and said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this shall surely die, and he shall restore fourfold for the lamb, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. At that point, Nathan then plucks up the courage and says to David, you, David, are that man. You are that man. Thus says the Lord of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your keeping, and gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I also would have given you so much more. Why have you despised the commandment of the Lord, to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah the Hittite with a sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. Now therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house. This was the curse that would come upon you because of what you did. The sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from within your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes, and give them to your neighbor. And he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. So David sent to Nathan and said, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. However, because of this deed, you have given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. The child also who is born to you shall surely die. And then Nathan departed to his house.
Wait, so the son was going to die?
Yeah.
I don't think that's from the child, though. The child is innocent.
I know, it's very sad, isn't it? But because of his misdeed,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that actually other people's, like, the things that our parents can do can sometimes have an impact on our lives, and that is just the way sin works. Sin pollutes everything around it. It destroys everything around it. This is why God is quite firm in warning us not to sin, because actually it's not just our lives, other people's lives are impacted, other people are hurt, and their lives are destroyed by the things, the choices that we make. That's why we are asked, we are commanded really to live a life that refrains from sin. You can carry on reading in chapter 12 how David prayed for the child. He prayed and he prayed and he prayed, and in the end the child sadly dies. As the prophet said, basically the child was going to die. However, David then takes Bathsheba into his home, and he marries her basically, and he has a child with her, a second child, whose name is Solomon.
Oh, yes.
and Solomon ends up becoming king.
Yeah.
So remember how many wives Solomon had?
Yeah.
900
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah.
So
900
concubines
wives
as well.
and concubines.
Community don't
Guess where that
want
last
me.
came from?
The
David.
father.
The father, exactly. That last, and the sword actually began to devour in the family. In fact, we'll see later on, if you've got a chance to read, Absalom, David's oldest son. Actually, he wasn't really the oldest son. David's one of his sons, the older ones. He rebels against David. And as was prophesied by Nathan, Absalom ends up taking over the kingdom. And David has to flee in exile, and Absalom ends up sleeping with all of David's wives in broad daylight.
There's so many.
So the
Too
curse
much
was
business.
fulfilled.
Yes.
Exactly, so the curse was fulfilled. It was a really, I've had a preacher say, it's the worst thing you can do to somebody is sleep with his wife. And there's something in that actually, when you sleep with somebody's wife, it is like you are taking from them, really like Nathan put it, a lamb, something really precious from them. And so what Absalom did is he went and slept with all of David's wives. It was like the curse was multiplied over and over again. Now we see in chapter 13 how the trouble that David unleashed in his family came to affect other people. In chapter 13, this is what it says. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. Anybody ever heard of this story? Absalom, the son of David, one of his sons, had a lovely sister, a beautiful sister, whose name was Tamar. And Ammon, who was also a son of David by another woman. So Ammon and Absalom were like step-brothers. They weren't quite direct brothers. So Ammon, the son of David, loved his stepsister. Now Ammon was so distressed over his sister Tamar. In other words, he loved her so much, but he could not have her because she was his stepsister, really. A sister by another woman, by another mother. So Ammon was so distressed over this sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin. And it was improper for Ammon to do anything to her, being his sister. But Ammon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. So David's brother had a son called Jonadab, who would have been Ammon's cousin, and Jonadab was friends with Ammon. Now Jonadab was a very crafty man, a very wily man. And he said to Ammon, "Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner and thinner after the day? Will you not tell me?" And Ammon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." So Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare food in my sight, that I may see it and eat from her hand.'" Guess what he was plotting? Evil. Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." And David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. She took flour and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and placed them out before him. But he refused to eat. Then Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." And because he was prince, they all had to obey. And they all went out from him. And then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into my bedroom, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon, her brother, in the bedroom. Now when she had brought them to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." But she answered him, "No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. And where could I take my shame? As for you, you would be like one of the fools of Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." In other words, let's do this the proper way. Let's get married and then do it the proper way. However, he would not heed her voice. And being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone," kicked her out. So she said to him, "No, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who attended him and said, "Here, put this woman out, away from me," and board the door behind her. Now, she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters were such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head, tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away, crying bitterly. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, "Has Amnon, your brother, been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart." Crazy, eh?
Absolute justice.
So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. And then verse 21, when the king heard of all these things, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. You can carry on reading in your own time how Absalom goes on to plot the murder of Amnon because he was really angry. He basically organized some sort of feast with the sheep shearers, and Amnon came along, and then basically, you can imagine the picture. It's like one prince. Hey, we've got a similar thing in our royal family, don't we? One prince going after the other. But it's not as bad. But basically,
There's no way his borders. Those stories.
you've got one prince killing the other prince, and you've got one prince kind of forcing himself onto a half-sister. Basically, one of the things you get with the Bible is that it's very raw. You know, one of the things that's unique about the Bible is that it's not all nice. It's not all good stories, all whatever, because the reality, it is the reality of people's lives. People
But
make
it seems like there was so much evil at that time.
You see, so there is a lot of people here today, I would say.
I know, but it's like those ones.
This is the thing, is that God doesn't paint a really other religions. In the other religions, you have books that kind of paint this kind of glorifying, this false sort of picture. But actually, with God, He just paints a very raw picture of what humanity is like. This is what happened. It all stemmed from, obviously, David and that moment of lust with Bathsheba. And Nathan, the prophet, then said, actually, because of what you have done, David, your whole family is going to be wrecked by what's going to be happening. And because of that, basically, a lot of strife came. The long and the short of it was basically that these brothers started fighting each other. And the brother Absalom ended up fighting David himself and kicked David out of the throne. Absalom pretended to be a good guy. He went and sat on the gate as people would come to see the king for advice. Absalom said, why do you want to go to the king? Why not come to me? And that way he became more and more popular, and he got to the point when he decided, right, after 3 years, it's time to make a move on the king, when he was popular. And so he basically formed his own army and kicked the king out. The king read the tea leaves, he saw the signs on the wall, and he was advised, flee, run, because your life is in danger. And he had to leg it and run. And David became a fugitive from his own son, basically, his own kids.
About striving out of the household.
Yes. So, one of the things you will see in the Bible is a reality. Now, basically, family is a place that God purposed and designed that it would be a cocoon, a nice, safe place where you could be brought up and where you could discover who you are. And as you discover who you are, that actually you would flourish. You would flourish. That was God's plan. However, it's like sowing seeds. Somebody wicked comes and sows a seed of craziness, basically, of evil. And so you end up finding in your family that you're born into a situation, not of your own choosing, but you're born into a situation where there is a lot of what I would call drama, a lot of things happening. Why? Because there is this sense that actually something out there doesn't want us to flourish.
Sometimes ancestral, isn't it?
Sometimes it's ancestral, sometimes it's just people making choices. Sometimes it's siblings making choices. I remember once praying with a lady, and it was really sad. She was the youngest in a family, and then there was like a gap of about 10 years. It was quite a big gap. And then there was all these other siblings that sort of were older than her. And her parents immigrated to Australia, basically. And when they immigrated, because the older kids were sort of fairly, close to their parents, and they immigrated together, but she made the choice to stay here. However, the time came when the parents became old and they were about to die. And so there came this moment. One of the moments that involves very often a lot of drama is the moment when the will and the inheritance is being passionate. That's where what's really in people can sometimes come out. And then suddenly you find the siblings who are nice and friendly. It's like,
it's my house.
It's mine, it's this. So this young lady, basically, her parents wrote the will that she would inherit the bulk of everything. Being the youngest, she was sort of favored. And the older ones did not like this. So they turned on her really horrifically. They just turned on her and they decided, if they could have killed her. They decided they were going to have it absolutely in for her.
This is why I said one is root or evil.
Yeah, exactly. And they made life a hell for her, really. And when she came for prayer, she was like, to me, actually, it's not about the house. These are my siblings. To me, it's not like, she genuinely loved them, but they were so mean and so cruel to her. But she just could not believe human beings could be so wicked, so horrible. Anyhow, in this family, we see a situation. I want you to just fix your eyes. This is the thing that God wanted me to bring today, is to put your eyes, kind of fix your eyes on Tamar, her situation. She grows up with these brothers, and then you've got Amnon and you've got Absalom, her brother, her sort of protector brother. And then you've got David, who's the king. And one after the other, they all let her down. All of them, really, when you look at the situation from where she was, the first obvious one, how did Amnon let her down? Very obvious. He tricked her, he abused her, he deceived her, and he wouldn't listen to her. He devalued her. He treated her like rubbish. After having used her, he hated her. He turned, and by the way, this is very typical of abusive behavior. Very often people who abuse, they will want to abuse you, and then they turn and they hate you. Because it's like that guilt that they suddenly feel, they want to dump it on you.
It was not love to begin with, was it?
It wasn't love.
Hate somebody when you're the one who hurt them doesn't make sense.
Exactly. It was lust. It was, this, by the way, is a very good teaching, a very good lesson on the difference between love and lust. Lust wants, no, I must have. Amnon was like, I'll even be sick. I must have my sister. But love, in the book of Corinthians, it says love is patient. You ladies, if the bloke turns up looking all really nice and hunky and he tells you, I love you, I love you, I love you. If he's not willing to wait for you, there is sense in actually making yourselves difficult to get, because actually it's to do with valuing yourself, and it's to do with that process of testing. Does this guy really love me? Because if he is not willing to wait for me, remember, what was his name? Jacob, who loved Rachel.
Yeah.
And then he got tricked and he ended up marrying Leah, the older sister.
Yeah.
He worked 7 years. He went to the dad and said to the dad, Dad, I love this daughter of yours. Give me this daughter. And the dad was like, okay, work for me 7 years. Yeah, 7 years is nothing. She's so much worth it. She is so much worth it. So he worked 7 years. And then on the day of the wedding, what happened?
He's in someone else.
So sad.
The older sister, boom. And he wakes up in the morning and he finds, oh no, there is the older sister. I've slept with the older sister. And so he goes to the dad. It's like bad eyes, yeah, exactly. And he goes to the dad and says, Dad, what's wrong with you? You should have given me Specsavers. You should have taken me to Specsavers.
Less as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Non-Specsavers.
Exactly. And then the dad
I know
says,
so much of those shirts, like.
and the dad then turns around and says, well, if you really want Rachel, it's going to be another 7 years. Another 7 years. And because he loved her, that's what genuine love looks like. Love will wait. Love is patient. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. So if that man or woman cannot wait for you, then know that that is not love. Amnon was like, no. Anyhow,
This was rape, isn't it?
it was lust. It was basically lust. He just wanted something. And then, as typically tends to happen, normally when abusers do this sort of thing, they feel guilty. They actually do feel guilty for the thing that they've done. But rather than taking responsibility in that moment, that, oh, I've done a really bad thing, they dump that guilt. Have you ever had that experience where somebody dumps on you something that really is their guilt, their shame? They have done something, and they should be the ones that are feeling naughty, but because they don't want to take responsibility, what they do is they dump it on you, and they say, you're the evil one, you're the baddie, it's you that made me do this. Some of them will even say, it's you that made me do this. And the whole thing that I wanted to see is Tamar, poor Tamar. She tried to reason with him and said, look, let's do this. Why don't you go and talk to Dad and marry me? And then if I get married, then at least it can be done kind of okay. She tried to sort of reason with him. It's like, at least let's do this the proper way, but he wouldn't have it. He absolutely would not have it. So, one thing after another. So Amnon let her down. The other man in her life, David, her dad. Her dad probably should have asked a few questions, don't you think? Because her dad, David, sees the son lying sick, and then the son suddenly says, please send me my sister so she can come and bake me some cake. I'm thinking the sensible thing, if you're a dad, would have been to sort of ask, why don't you maybe, we could have some servants, they can come and bake you some cakes. Why does it have to be your sister? He maybe should have asked a
He was
question
so
or two.
naive. He must have been thinking like, well, he loves his sister.
Exactly. There was just this absolute naivety. He was completely...
He loves his sister.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, because he had so many wives and concubines, he didn't really have time for...
He didn't
You know
have...
what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. It's one of the things about David that actually he was not very good as a dad. He didn't really understand what it was to be a father, except much later on when Absalom rose up to rebel against him and he really cried, he mourned for his son. But generally speaking, David really didn't understand, and that was partly because David himself wasn't fathered that well.
Oh, shame. That's so
If you remember the situation, when David was going to be anointed as king, Samuel the prophet goes to the house of his dad, Jesse, and says to Jesse, is there a son, basically here? I'm here because there's a son that has to be anointed king. So Jesse brings out the oldest, and then brings out the next son, and the next son, and the next son, until all the sons. And basically, Samuel is like, I'm sure you've still got another son somewhere. You've got another son somewhere. And so David's dad then says, actually, yeah, there is another son. He's like way out there looking after the sheep somewhere. So he didn't have a very good relationship with his dad. Because of that, this is one of the things you will see very often in families, that actually parents can only give you what they have. It's the same thing with you guys, by the way, is you'll only be able to pass on to other generations what you have. So unless either some other source puts into you so that you can pass to your children, basically all that you will pass to your children is what you have.
Or you could work for something and then pass.
You could work for, exactly, you could receive it. God could give you something that you then pass to your children that basically is more than whatever. But David didn't really have, so when he came to his own children, he was like, I don't know how to father them, I don't know whatever. So Tamar was let down by her dad. And then last and not least, Tamar was let down by her brother. The brother who was supposed to protect her, Absalom. Remember when she goes back home, what does Absalom say?
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Let off the hook.
Just
I'll kill him later.
don't worry, I'll sort it out later. I'll deal with it later. Just don't worry. Just don't take this matter to heart. That's what it says in verse 20. Amnon, your brother, has been with you.
That's all.
And then that was all he asked. Because he could figure out, he worked out that actually something must have happened. Because here's my sister coming with all her clothes torn, putting her head and weeping. And so he then just asked a simple question, has Amnon, your brother, been with you? He probably worked out that Amnon fancied his sister. So then he then turns around and says, oh, don't take this thing to heart. Don't take this thing to heart. Sometimes in that moment when we are hurt by people, when people do things against us, sometimes the worst thing that people can say is, oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. It's like a little nothing. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. It's just a little bit of nothing. It's like nothing.
Or they're like, oh, stop being dramatic.
Sorry?
No empathy.
No empathy, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like,
You're being a woman.
you're being a woman, yes.
It's that as well.
So Tamar,
Sorry to not be a man.
Tamar goes away and she locks herself, it says, in her brother's house for the rest of her life.
what?
She decided she would not get married, she decided she would not whatever. And this one incident,
It's not an incident.
basically, it's more than an incident, yeah, exactly. This one moment in her life cast a shadow over her life that stayed with her to her death. She decided she would go and lock herself in her brother's house and she would live there till the day of her death. Now, one of the things that I wanted to proclaim, to really say, is that one of the things that Jesus came to do for us is to take away the power of things in our lives that could have the possibility of defining us. Sometimes we can identify there is one moment in my life that everything changed. Sometimes we can see it. Maybe somebody said something to me. Maybe something did something to me. Maybe somebody didn't do something that they were supposed to do to me. Sorry?
Or we did something.
Or we did something, yeah. Or maybe we did something. And that thing ends up defining your life. So that from that moment on, it's like you put yourself in a prison. Or rather, that thing puts you in a prison. And you're stuck like Tamar. One of the encouraging things about Jesus, on the very first day of his ministry, day one of his ministry, he stood up in the synagogue and said, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring those who are in dungeons, who have locked themselves away, to bring them out into liberty, into freedom. So that those things don't lock you away in a prison." Prisons are horrible places. Tamar was stuck in a prison. It wasn't the prison wasn't the four walls. It was psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what had happened to her, her personality. It's like she manifested outwardly by staying in the home. She was physically manifesting what was going on in her spirit. In her spirit that day, it was like she decided to step away from life.
She felt broken.
Yes, her spirit was broken. She walked away from life and she decided, I am not going to interact with life anymore. I am just going to be a recluse. Maybe because she couldn't trust anybody. Maybe because she felt life was horrible, too much. So, the big thing I wanted to bring to you, number one, is that despite all the drama that there can be in our families, value yourself. Make choices that value who you are. I think if Tamar had been a bit savvy, I think somewhere in there, I think probably there would have been something in her that would have been going, is it really wise to go and see? I'm not blaming her, but is it wise to go by myself to go and see my brother?
But she had no
So-
idea that that's how he was, and he was going to act like that.
That's true, and I'm not laying blame to her.
She said it's a brother.
However, exactly, he thought maybe he could trust her. And it certainly sounds like it's a wise thing. The thing I'm getting to is, in those family situations that you find yourselves in, try and be a bit savvy. Don't put yourself in a situation where
Use some wisdom.
you can be taken advantage of, or where you can. It's not to say that we are not to trust our families. So, number one, value yourself. In fact, number one, number two, number three, right to number 1 million. Value yourself. And that might mean sometimes, by the way, making choices about, like, in that whole area of boy-girl relationships, not putting yourself in a place where you might be vulnerable. Avoiding maybe being in a situation where you're alone with this person all by yourself, where temptations, let's be honest, human being, flesh, temptations can take hold, and you can then find yourselves in situations where things are compromising. The whole beginning of all of this is
To be left holding the
David.
baby.
Sorry?
To be left holding the baby.
Then you're left holding a little baby, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Before you know it. The
That's
whole
it.
situation, the whole reason all this happens is because
Okay.
David sees a young woman and he
Girls.
calls her to himself, and they have this thing in secret. By the way, there is no such thing spiritually as in secret. In the spiritual realms, they see everything. You might think it's being done in secret, but actually accountability, like Nathan, he could see everything. He saw everything. He came and told the king, this is what you have done. Boom, 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 boom. And this is the consequence for everything that you've done. So,
Be
be
uncomfortable.
exactly, and especially in the fact that the society that we live in, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure that's basically saying, oh, there's nothing wrong. Really, there's nothing wrong if you're just with that person by themselves or this, that, and the other. But actually, sometimes there's wisdom in saying, I will be valuing to myself. So, valuing yourself is good. The other thing is really, Tamar ended up in a situation where her life effectively came under a curse. She basically got stuck in that moment in her life, not of her own choosing. I want to say to you that if you do recognize that there are moments in your life that you can see that moment, things changed. And from that moment on, there is the propensity for me to look at myself differently. I look at myself differently from that moment. We're just going to take a moment now to bring that moment before God. And in prayer, we're going to ask for God to refute that moment. Jesus came to take away that prison that moment may have locked you in. And so we're going to pray and we're going to ask Jesus to release you from that moment or moments that have put you in that prison. It might be important to forgive people who were responsible for putting you in that prison. For Tamar, she would have had to forgive Absalom, her dad, her brother Amnon, obviously, maybe even her mother, because you ask the question, where's her mother in all this? There should have been all these people that were protecting and covering her, but she didn't have that covering. So we're going to pray and bring our lives to God. And we're going to say, God, would you define me? I don't want that moment to define me. I don't want the circumstances to define me. I resist the urge to be imprisoned by those things. I ask you to speak into my life and you set me free from all those things that are trying to define me, they're trying to imprison me, they're trying to lock me away. Let's pray.